And now to examine the question of what exactly it was that Viktor Orban was proposing, we are joined by Olexiy Haran, comparative politics professor from the University of Kyiv Mohyla Academy. Good evening and welcome to TVP World.
Good evening. I hope you see me well, because in 10 minutes there will be blackout in my vicinity. So I hope we'll finish by that.
We'll do our best to take as much time as we possibly can under your constraints.
And we do see and hear you very well at the moment.
Okay. Very good.
So I'll start right away. So now, on the heels of Hungary having assumed the presidency of the EU Council, we see Viktor Orban traveling to Kyiv. So why such a visit now?
Well, basically, there are controversial assessments by Ukrainian experts and observers, and some are saying that this is typical maneuver for Orban. But the others are cautious optimists, and they see that for Mr. Orban, he appeared to be quite isolated in Europe because of his position regarding Putin, regarding blockade to Ukraine, and he needs somehow to overcome it, at least from a symbolic point of view, because Hungary is heading the European Council. Let me draw your attention to the fact that actually, when on principal issues regarding relations, for example, between Ukraine and EU, Hungary didn't block the decision. Okay? So basically, they behaved in the same way as other EU countries. Moreover, Hungary was a member of Global Peace Summit, which was recently held in Switzerland, and Hungary signed the final communique. So again, it behaved in the way other Western countries, EU and NATO countries, behaved. So it means that it's very difficult, to ignore what other countries are saying, especially after recent elections to European Parliament. With the party of Orban, which is called Fidesz, actually they were a member of right conservative group, but then they were excluded. And now the question is that they appeared to be alone in the European Parliament, which is not good for them, for having their voice in the European Parliament. So they would like to rejoin the faction of European conservatives, and the key faction there, the key party in this faction is the party of Italian Prime Minister. And there are some reports that actually she demanded from Orban to stop blocking Ukraine and to support Ukraine during the war, and actually stop talking about ceasefire. And instead,
yes, the professor.
So
Professor, Orban hasn't stopped talking about ceasefires. He talked about them today with Zelenskyy. He also said things like, Ukraine isn't a sovereign country any longer because it depends on the West. So it sounds as though he's playing a very interesting game. On the one hand, he seems to be towing the European line. On the other hand, he seems to be Putin's mouthpiece. Which one is it? Or is it both?
Well, again, it may be both, because he's a very experienced politician and he is maneuvering, I'm not sure, actually, unfortunately, to say about his own values, because his evolution was very, very dramatic, from being a Democrat to becoming kind of a authoritarian leader. Regarding what was said today during the conference, again, he mentioned this idea of ceasefire, but he said that this is that This is suggestion to Ukraine, which cannot be imposed on a sovereign country. And he understands, he continued, he said, he understands the Ukrainian arguments as well. So basically, it's not as it's not a typical dramatic statement from Mr. Orban. So again, we need to wait and see. But we see that now both countries are trying to improve relations and to move to some compromises. The main compromises are regarding ethnic Hungarian minority in Ukraine. By the way, for you to understand, this ethnic minority is less than 100,000 people who lives predominantly in Transcarpathia. And actually, this is exploited by Orban in his domestic politics, to build his domestic politics on some nationalist slogans. And in fact, what he was saying regarding Hungarian minority in Ukraine, actually, it wasn't good for this Hungarian minority because it puts them in a difficult situation. And because Orban spreads Hungarian passports to Ukrainian citizens, so actually it diminished the number of ethnic Hungarian minority in Ukraine. So from my understanding, there are so-called 11 points. They are not publicly announced, but it seems that now there is a debate over these points presented by Hungarian side. And some of them are rejected by Ukrainian side. Yeah. Some of them are impossible to implement. But on some, there is a possibility of compromise.
Yes, but Professor, you'll excuse me if I interrupt. We have very little time left. But this actually sounds like Putin's playbook. I mean, it's exactly the argument he used before he invaded Ukraine. He said that ethnic Russians were being maltreated, and he handed out Russian passports like sweeties. And now I'm not suggesting for a second that Orban is planning to do that as well, but again we see a similarity in the attitude that Orban is displaying. On top of which, his foreign minister has been to Russia 5 times since the war started.
Right. Actually, his foreign minister, Mr. Siarta, is the most radical among the top Hungarian leaders. So basically, again, experts are saying that it's symbolic that now he's not in Kyiv. So he's not accompanying Orban, because it would create a more difficult situation for negotiations and compromises. But definitely, Hungary never thought about say, annexation of Transcarpathia. Why? Because Hungary is a member of the EU and NATO, and we know what is the policy of EU and NATO. So I do not want to present everything in a rosy way, but at the same time, we should wait and see. But at the same time, there are possibilities for some compromises. For example, in the places where, say, 15% of the population are Hungarians, why not having bilingual names of the streets?
Thank you very much for your insights, Professor. Come and see us again soon.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
And of course, we had a stark reminder, right, of the reality as Russia continues its illegal invasion of Ukraine, that things like rolling blackouts are something that the Ukrainians have had to have gotten used to living. But for now, since we've reached the top of the hour, it is now time to go to Benjamin Lee with the latest headlines.